Edition of Night Talk on PCNC. Let's get to the point.
You bet it's a special edition of Night Talk. Good evening. I'm Tanae Kroon with American Urban Radio Networks, and this is the Friday night edition of Night Talk. We call it Get to the Point, and one of the points I know a lot of people are thinking about, it's a Steeler night, but we're not going to be talking about the Steelers. What we're going to be doing is getting to the point on a lot of different issues. Smoking ban in public places, gambling proposed here in southwestern Pennsylvania. Now, our guests are going to be able to get to the point because they know everything, almost everything anyway. Republican Pennsylvania State Representative Michael Diven, welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Rich Fitzgerald, he's a Democrat and president of the Allegheny County Council. And my good friend, Dr. Audrey Gusky, she's with Duquesne University. And one of the things we all were talking about before we came on the air is about the fact that it's school time. Yes, you'll be able to get those little kiddies. I know you're sorry to see them go back to school. I know you want to have them around the house and running around and doing all kinds of things. Right. But now it's time to go back to school. And I know, Audrey, you were saying that you are really looking forward to having them back at Duquesne.
Well, I am thrilled to start a new year. I mean, it's the end of the summer, so Tanae, you know, it's sort of like the bittersweet. I'm sorry to see the summer end, but we are excited to have the students coming back. We had move-in day on Wednesday, so we had all the students coming through. The freshmen are around. They're doing the orientation, and we are thrilled. But you know what? Economically, back to school shopping is a huge impact on the local community. The average family spent over $500 on back to school shopping.
Hey, and I think I heard that the spending for back to school rivals or comes pretty close to Christmas.
Well, I wouldn't say rivals, but it's the second busiest shopping season of the year. So you've got about 50% of your retail sales during the holiday season, but about 20% of it or more comes during the back to school shopping season, so it's huge. And especially parents who have freshmen coming into college, they're spending even more. They're spending about $1,000 for each child because computers and iPods and all the fun stuff and the dorm stuff and the towels and sheets and
all the things.
And girls are worse than guys, of course. They have every electronics and every hair product and clothes, and they're practically taking their rooms with them. In fact, they're taking their whole house
Well, they
with
should.
them.
They
Yes,
should.
they
We
should.
have to.
They need to be comfortable.
And I know, Rich, you had me cracking up when you were saying when you were going home, you weren't taking your kids to school. You were just trying to get home and not even thinking. Tell us the story about going through Oakland.
Well, going through Oakland today, it was a madhouse. It was move-in day in Oakland today, and the Parkway was backed up at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, getting off the Oakland exit. So everybody was coming in. And Audrey, you know, from your standpoint, I think of all the economic generation that's done with all these students coming in to Oakland, to Duquesne, to all of our universities. They're spending a lot of money, not just on their tuition, but helping our local economy.
True.
From the other standpoint, I agree with you. We've done the back to school shopping. My wife, Kathy, said tonight she's ready for school to start next week, so she's all prepared. And I think we know what you mean about the iPods and the
How old?
The sheets. Well, we've got college all the way. We have 8 kids, so they're all going back to school. So we have 2 in college, 2 in high school, and on down, and they all need new shoes and new dresses and new everything to go back. So there's no doubt about it. It's a spur for the economy.
No wonder you took a bus here today. All that money you had to spend. And I know one thing that, Michael, you were anticipating.
Yes.
You don't have any kids going back to school, but you do have one on the way, coming soon.
Yes. I'm really excited about that. Now, my wife is expecting in November,
Yay.
so you know, it's something, you know, when we talk about school, I was talking to a friend of mine, and he said, well, you know, I just read an article that said, now that you're having a kid, you have to put $1,000 a month away so that you can pay for college. And my response was, I was a Division I scholarship athlete. I played football in college. And my wife was an academic All-American swimmer. So I said, if our kids are going to college, it's going to be because they're good athletes. So we've got our fingers crossed that, you know, we don't have a kid that's real uncoordinated or small. So, but it's been really exciting. It really has, the whole process. And, you know, I think my wife has been, you know, tremendous, and I'm really, really looking forward to it.
And she is glowing, looking so beautiful over there.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
she really
you.
is. We don't have a camera to be able to pan over the show, but just trust us. We're doing it. We know this. And Audrey, real quick, because we've got another minute before we got to go to a commercial. Any tips for parents, tips for young people going to college? First time you're talking about the freshmen that you could give?
A lot of tips. Basically, it's not high school, it's not an extended form of high school, so study, it's going to be harder, be academic. I would say also make lots of friends, look for new experiences, try different activities. That's what it's all about. If you have a boyfriend or girlfriend from high school.
Good activities though, right?
Oh, lots of
Let's
good activities.
stress that.
Yes.
Not the negative activities that sometimes kids get involved with in college.
No, have to do the right things, the professional things, and some
Okay.
social things too. But that, it's some of the tips. And for parents, it's hard a lot of times if it's their first child. So I always advise them, let your kids make their mistakes. Don't put too much pressure on them the first semester. Allow them to make their own decisions. It's a big deal. And
it
kids
is.
don't, students
is.
don't, balancing the checkbook is a huge thing.
Yeah.
They're going to overextend themselves. They're going to wash their underwear and it's going to turn pink. So they're going to have all those fun things as well.
Well, just having them out of the house. I know my son now is 31 years old. He's an old man.
My son
And
is
I have
31
a
too.
four-year-old grandbaby.
Oh,
and I remember him going off to school, and I didn't want to let him go.
Yeah.
And I guess that's another thing that parents have to know, that empty nest thing.
Right, it's tough for parents. And fortunately at Duquesne we have even some seminars for the parents as they're dropping their kids off to sort of let them go in the empty nest syndrome. And my daughter's going to be a junior at Duquesne, so I know what it's like to pack her up. But we got her moved in yesterday.
Great.
We took 3 carloads to get her there, but
Okay.
she's actually there.
Wow.
So I've also boosted the economy
My
very
daughter's
well.
better not be hearing that because we're driving back to Penn State on Tuesday. They got to do it in one car. So.
One car. Well, we're going to do this in one break, the first break. We're going to have a lot more to talk about on Night Talk. Get to the point. Stay right with us, please, okay? I know you will. We got a lot more to talk about. One of the things we're going to be talking about when we come back, you know that they're talking about you won't be able to light up a smoking ban, and we got the man behind that smoking ban right here with us. Stay right where you are. Night Talk will be right back after this. Welcome back to Night Talk. Get to the point on PCNC. I'm Tanae Kroom, and with us, Republican Pennsylvania State Representative Michael Divin, Rich Fitzgerald, he's a Democrat, president of the Allegheny County Council, and Duquesne University's illustrious Dr. Audrey Gusky. Allegheny County Council just this week voted, it was a unanimous vote, to hold a public hearing on a proposed smoking ban. And as I said before we went to commercial break, the man behind that, the proposal, is right here with us. Tell us a little bit about, Rich, why you proposed that ban.
Well, this was something that I've been looking at and working on for a long time. I actually still believe, and I talked to Michael about this, that statewide is the way for it to happen. But we've been frustrated in Allegheny County that it hasn't moved. 2 things happened this summer that really turned it around. Number one, the Surgeon General came out with a report saying that secondhand smoke is responsible for over 50,000 deaths a year. And I'll be honest with you, it shocked me that a Bush administration Surgeon General would say that. Then I found out that he was fired a few weeks later, but he still came out with the report.
We're going to just stick with the smoking ban now.
And secondly, the Restaurant Association did a 180. They have always been against a smoking ban. They now support this. They support a smoking ban in restaurants, in taverns, now they want it to happen everywhere. They don't want casinos to be exempted. They don't want small clubs to be exempted. We're kind of working on that right now. The way I see it in Allegheny County, if the state doesn't move within the next month or 2, we probably will enact a ban in Allegheny County, and it will be pretty comprehensive. It'll deal with all restaurants, all bars, casinos, all indoor public facilities are going to be covered. And the advice we've gotten from the health department is they concur with that. They think that's the way to go because we need to protect our workers. People who work in restaurants often don't have a lot of choices in their employment. I almost analogize it to years ago when steel mills and coal mines were dangerous places to work and the government stepped in to make them safer. We need to make restaurants and places where the workers are come in contact with this, knowing the hazards of secondhand smoke.
Now, when we talk about a smoking ban, are we saying there is no place absolutely in a restaurant, in a bar, that someone would be able to smoke? Because there's some bans,
That's
but then
correct.
they have a spot or a space or an area
No, it looks
where
like
people...
you are going to have to go outside, and you'll probably have to go so many feet from the door, 15 feet, 20 feet. There will be some distance you will have to go, but nowhere inside the building will you be allowed to smoke.
And the critics are saying, okay, that's all well and good, but what about the money? That there's going to really hurt the economy with having a ban like that, because there are going to be people that are not going to go out to be able to go to these places because I can't smoke. I'm not going to go.
Well,
so therefore they won't spend.
That was kind of one of the reasons I didn't move on this earlier. I was concerned about that. But we're late to this game. There's about 750 municipalities across this country who have smoking bans. About 15 states have passed so we're not early to this, and the studies have shown that the restaurants have actually increased their business because young people, like Michael, wants to take his young baby out. He doesn't have to worry about going to a restaurant and exposing his child to smoking. He knows wherever he goes, it's going to be safe. So I think we're seeing more business because of the smoking ban in places like New York, New Jersey, California. People feel safe that they can go out and not be bombarded with secondhand smoke.
Yeah, that's my understanding too, and that's what I found. And basically, I think if it's a county like Allegheny and people live close to Westmoreland or Butler, where they can maybe go to another restaurant or bar just over a line, then in that case you may lose business. But overall, I'm a non-smoker, and when I go out to restaurants or bars, you don't want to come home smelling.
Well, I won't sit around anybody smoking. But I'm a non-smoker
right,
too.
But sometimes it's just overwhelming because it's totally in the place. And I think that they're infringing upon our rights as non-smokers when they're smoking, and so I totally
Michael,
support
what's
that.
it look like from Harrisburg?
I can tell you, I'm actually on the Health and Human Services Committee, and we had a vote earlier this year that ended up being a 14-14 tie on the legislation in committee, and I voted against the legislation. And one of the reasons why is Philadelphia actually has a pretty good compromise. What they've done is they've allowed fraternal organizations like the Vets Clubs or those local clubs to continue to provide an environment where they can choose whether they're smoke-free or not. And then smaller bars, mom and pop operations that serve less than 10% of their food, and tobacco stores, allowing them to do that. So there's some exemptions built in.
Why would they be given exemptions? Why exempt anybody?
Well, I think that, especially like with a tobacco store, that's their business, and, it is a legal product, and, giving them an exemption, protects them from being forced out of business. And I think there's a common ground that we can come to, and I do think that in Pennsylvania you're going to see legislation pass probably sometime this fall. But I do think that, one of the things that we've tried to do, at least in Harrisburg, is be cognizant of the fact that we don't want to drive people out of business. I mean, you have to keep in mind what we're talking about is cigarettes that are legal, and we're making a lot of revenue off of the cigarette tax. And if we were that concerned, it should be dealt with at the federal level, where you'd have, the federal government outlaw, the distribution of cigarettes. But unfortunately, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. But I think that what we need to look at is we need to be cognizant of the fact that there are some small, and I think it might be 3%. I think one of the studies I looked at, 3% of the liquor licenses would fit into this category, and providing an option and giving people the choice in that 3%, I think is great. But if you look at the trend nationally, hotel chains like Marriott, most of your larger restaurant chains, they've already gone in that direction, and I think it's going to happen. I'd hate to see us take a lot of the smaller independent businesses and drive them out of business when we can give them a choice to do that.
Well, I'm going to give you a choice, and I'm not going to give you a choice. I'm going to tell you to stay right here. Don't choose. Stay with me, please. We're going to have a lot more of Night Talk. Get to the point after this. We're going to be talking about gambling. I bet, you bet, we will. I know this. Safe bet. All right. Stay right there. We'll be back. Welcome back to Night Talk. Get to the point on PCNC. We've been talking about a lot of different things, and what we want to talk about now is something that everybody is talking about, and that is the fact that gaming is coming here. I understand that there are members of the company Gaming Ventures, former City Councilman Salah Uddin and former Steelers defensive back J.T. Thomas. They won a contract, and what I'm trying to find out now is, no matter what happens, it's going to come, right? Definitely. But what is it going to mean to Allegheny County? Who wants to jump in?
Well, I can tell you, we debated this for a long time, and originally there was actually an amendment that would have taken it from Pittsburgh getting a non-track facility to the statistical metropolitan Pittsburgh area, which is the 10-county region around. And I think that the Allegheny County and Pittsburgh delegation came together and worked to make sure that Pittsburgh's interest was protected. And one of the reasons is obviously it's going to be an economic engine. It's going to provide, I think, 500 or 600 jobs that are supposed to be good paying with health care benefits. The other is that in the legislation that establishes gambling, the local municipality and the host county would receive, I think, 1% each of 1 or 2% each of the gross revenues. So Pittsburgh and Allegheny County would each receive in the neighborhood of between $20 and $30 million annually in new revenue as a result of hosting the non-track facility. So it was a pretty big deal to make sure that we were protected here, and I do think that now we have the process which I think that there's a lot of flaws in the process. When we originally passed the legislation, I think it was a 1,200-page bill, and we tried to put in protections, and I voted on a lot of amendments like eliminating the 1% ownership.
Because that's what some people say, they're getting paid.
Well,
like
the same legislators and lobbyists can own 1% of a casino. Now, I don't own 1% of a casino and wouldn't, have the opportunity to do so even if somebody, did give me the opportunity. But I do think that there's an appearance of impropriety that we need to put in check, and we've actually passed legislation in the House, and we're waiting for the Senate to do that. The other thing I think that was really disconcerting from my standpoint was seeing where you had a lobbyist who had a minor child as a principal in one of the distributorship licenses.
Okay, yes.
I actually supported legislation and amendments to the gaming laws that would eliminate the middleman and take that whole what's become kind of a fiasco out of the gambling process. But I think that we're just at the start of a pretty rocky road. I can tell you that in 12 states that have legalized casino gambling, there's been a slew of indictments and convictions of people that were responsible for changing the public policy to allow casino gambling. So I think that unfortunately, when you deal with the magnitude of profits that this industry generates, I think it was explained to me initially that there was a group of us that wanted to go out to auction and auction off the licenses. In the legislation, it's set at $50 million. What that means is that somebody can go to Wall Street, borrow $50 million, get that license, which is one of 14 monopolies, borrow another $250 million to build the casinos, and within 10 years they can pay that $300 million of debt off and clear $1 billion worth of profit, which is an enormous sum of money. And so I think that as we move forward, this is just going to be kind of the tip of the iceberg. I think we're trying to do everything we can to, at least myself and a few other legislators, to introduce more protections into the gambling law in the state. And I think that there's going to be a lot more bumps in the road as this thing unfolds.
And speaking of bumps in the road, one of the other things, I was just speaking to someone today and said that we'd be talking about this, and they were concerned about having any kind of gaming place in the Hill District because it is so close to residential neighborhoods. And they said they would hope that that did not happen because they were fearful of what might happen to the children, to the older people, to just regular folks trying to live, and all of the noise and the possible crime and other things that might occur. Is there any consideration given to that kind of thing?
Well, of course, it's close to Duquesne, too, and that's one of our concerns is with the students being there, too. When you bring something like this, an industry like this into the area, there's a lot of concern because you are bringing some of the more seedier parts of life there. And my question is, are we really going to be bringing that much income into the community? Has it been proven in other areas, and is it going to be that much money? It just, I think maybe some of the figures have been inflated quite a bit, and I'm just.
Rich?
I agree with Dr. Guska. I think the figures are inflated, but I think also it's not an economic generator. Who's spending the money? The local people they're spending it at a casino. Would they be spending it at the movie theater or Kennywood Park or a restaurant?
So it's not going to expand outside of the casino?
I think one of the benefits, or one of the selling points, was we have a lot of people that are already going to West Virginia and our part of the state, and in the other part of the state they're going to New Jersey. So let's keep, quote, some of that money here. I guess it's an argument that you can make, but it's a mixed blessing. This is a dual-edged sword. For all the revenue we get, and Michael's right, and they did a good job to help Allegheny County's budget and the city of Pittsburgh's budget, but there's also going to be problems that are going to come with this, wherever it's located, the Hill District, the North Shore, or the South Side over Station Square. wherever it happens, there's going to be big changes in how those neighborhoods are impacted.
Hold that thought, because we got to take a break, because I want to come back and talk some more about this, because this is a very serious subject, and it's coming, but we got to know what to deal with and what to expect. Night Talk will be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Night Talk. Get to the point. State Representative Michael Diven is here. County Councilman Rich Fitzgerald and Dr. Audrey Gusky with Duquesne University. And we were talking about that whole controversial issue of gaming, of slots and all of that coming to Western Pennsylvania, to the Pittsburgh area. And one of the things we were saying during the break is the fact that that some people are arguing that we'll be generating money. And I know, Rich, you were saying, well, maybe not so much.
Well, I mean, for the local economy. I mean, our local economy is still, we make our money by money that comes into this region. Manufacturing, we were talking about the college kids earlier today. I mean, it's a huge impact of all the money that comes in through research grants we get, et cetera. A lot of the money at a casino is going to be transferred within the economy. It's like retail establishments. They don't generally bring money in other than for that individual business. But the other problem is going to be the social impact and the social cost. As a county official who deals with a huge human service budget, children and youth and family, mental health, mental retardation, some of these social service agencies that are already stretched to the limit might be stretched even further with problems that will come with gambling, addictions, bankruptcies.
People spending their rent money and
not controlling it. It's not the person that goes down and maybe drops $20 or $50. They take the whole paycheck down there, and then what happens to their families? What happens to their children? Yeah, exactly. That's the concern.
Well, one of the things that we looked at, when we passed the legislation, I voted in favor of it. And I didn't go into this with the idea that this was some kind of panacea that was going to save, Pittsburgh. I thought this would be a complement to help us, continue to provide, opportunities for people to enjoy themselves and potentially raise some revenue to help lower property taxes. I've never been a fan of gambling. I don't gamble myself. I think that, one of the things that I look at, though, when I was making my decision on whether or not to support this, I was actually leaning not to support it, but somebody brought up a great point. They said, look, if we were really serious about trying to help people and save them from getting into positions because of gambling, then we would outlaw credit cards. More people are in bankruptcy because of credit cards than any other reason. And I think that one of the things that we have to do as a government is to give people the freedom to do what they want. At the same time, we have to be sympathetic to the potential dangers of gambling, and I think we really strive in the legislation to put in protections and funding for gambling addictions, funding for human services to help and to keep the gaming companies responsible when marketing towards people that are chronic gamblers or people that have a real problem. So I think some of those protections were built in the legislation, and as we move forward, obviously we're going to probably have to go back and add to it.
And I know during the break too, I think, Rich, it was you and I think that was saying that some of the places that I never even thought about till you said this, and that is some of the places that have the bingo nights could be hurt by this.
Yeah, there's going to be an effect, a ripple effect that we just don't know until it probably gets up and running and we see some of the effects. And as Michael said, probably adjustments will have to be made, maybe with state legislation, maybe with some local zoning legislation. But we do need to keep an eye on it. We do need to make sure there are controls so that it doesn't just turn into the wild, wild west.
Well, and one of the things that we looked at, aside from the gambling, the proceeds that are going to be raised, at least the state tax dollars that are going to be taken in, are going to be dedicated towards property tax reduction, which I think is a big win for people that,
That's a good thing.
I will concede that I think that some of Governor Rendell's numbers, like I think they were saying they're going to raise $1 billion. I think that there's some inflation in those numbers, but at the end of the day, there's going to be a considerable amount of money that's going to help to alleviate some of the rising property taxes that are really crushing in our part of the state. I think that we see a number of people. That's one of the biggest issues when you look at popular opinion polls. People are saying that property taxes are just killing them, school property taxes in particular. And I think what we did with the legislation for gambling was we linked the two problems, and we found a new revenue stream that's going to be dedicated to help significantly reduce. Now, I was one of the people that wanted to expand it and increase the sales tax to help completely eliminate the homestead, the primary residence property taxes, but unfortunately the Senate and the state didn't see that as a viable option. But again, it's a good first step to addressing property tax
I'm going to
reform.
jump on real quick. If you're going to deal with school funding and property tax, we have to deal with it on the expense side. We're always looking at more revenues. We have too many school districts in Allegheny County. We have 43 school districts. I just came from down in Mecklenburg County, Charlotte, almost the same population size that we have. In fact, they'll be ahead of us in a few years. They have 17 high schools countywide, one school district countywide. We have 52 high schools in Allegheny County. That means 52 gymnasiums with tracks, swimming pools, athletic directors. I mean, we love our Friday night football, don't get me wrong, but there's a cost associated with that. The cost right now is on property tax. We're going to try to bring more money into it, but we need to figure out a way to start to combine.
Even with the schools closing, even with the Pittsburgh
well, you've
schools?
got 132.
So that's not really putting a big
We're closing
dent in
some
it?
elementary schools until we start. That's part of putting a dent in the cities. But remember, we have 43 school districts in the county. That's just one school district.
Well, you got
in Pittsburgh.
132 municipalities.
We need to start consolidating. If we're going to get to the cost problem, the property tax, school tax problem, we have to start consolidating. That's the only way to get
Why
there.
isn't that happening?
It's just the history of Allegheny County. We've always had, a lot of, kind of factionalization of government. One of the things that I've been working on for the past 2 years, which hits on what Rich has just talked about, is controlling the spending side. One of the things that I did a few years ago was I introduced a resolution to study consolidating how we purchase health care benefits for school districts. There's 501 school districts in the state, and they're going out and they're purchasing their health care independently. And a lot of the school districts, the smaller ones, don't have the risk pools large enough to self-insure, so they're paying somebody else to assume their risk, and they're not in a position of strength when dealing with the health care providers. And the study actually came back, and it showed that if we purchased our health care collectively with the 501 school districts, we could save upwards to $863 million.
So it's a lot of work that has to be done.
Well, I can tell you for the last 2 years I've been working on legislation with the key stakeholders and some other state reps, and we're in a position where we've been working with Donna Cooper from Governor Rendell's office, who's his policy director, and we have a draft legislation that I'll be introducing this fall that potentially can streamline how we purchase health care and really increase the savings. And one of the biggest drivers in school districts right now as far as their cost growth is the health care benefits. They're raising at a rate about 20 to 26%. And on top of it, it's the #1 cause for school district strikes, and Pennsylvania leads the country in school district strikes. So if we can get a hold of this on the spending side, hopefully it can help us get a hold of the property tax on the other side.
A lot more of that as you work towards
Yes.
that legislation in the fall. Something very serious when we come back, and that is the fact that some people in many neighborhoods are afraid to go outside, and it's for a very good reason, the violence in the Pittsburgh areas in some neighborhoods. More on that when Night Talk returns after these messages. And we're back with Night Talk, Get to the Point. Something very serious, everybody. And I guess in some ways, most people have been touched by violence, if not directly in your neighborhood. You know someone or know someone who knows someone who's been touched by violence. And I'm looking now at an article from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and I want to read from that because it's touched me. The sign posted, it reads, on Carla Boyce's patio door. It says, "God help us." Might be taken as a sign of weakness by some, but the Homewood resident says it gives her strength in the face of a rising tide of violence. In a picture on that page of a 100-year-old woman who's lived in Homewood for 70 years, she's afraid, feeling, she said, nothing like she did so many years ago. There's been so many incidents of violence, of shootings, and a lot involving young people. What is going on? What can we do?
It's very scary, and it's a huge problem, obviously. And my understanding nationally, statistics as far as violent crime has gone down, and even in the Pittsburgh area. but yet it seems like certain neighborhoods, it's rippling through it and destroying them. They're losing control of their lives. The article that you had read from, they also continued and said that people, they feel like vampires. They have to go hide in their houses at night because they're afraid to go out, even during the day. And a lot of children are being affected, and the senior citizens in particular, that's their homes, that's their lives, they've been there, they can't go anywhere else, and they're very, very frightened and very concerned, and I don't know what the answer is. They've upped the police protection, but it needs to come from the communities, and they're doing their best, but it's a tough situation.
Rich, what can be done from your standpoint, do you think, in terms of trying to make the neighborhood safer? And I don't want to seem like I'm picking on Homewood, because there are a lot of other areas, but there have been a lot of incidents in Homewood, a very thriving community, a place full of wonderful people who don't want that. It's a very tiny amount of people doing that. Most of the people, the majority, are good citizens.
Right. Well, you do. Most of the people in that neighborhood, they get up every day, they go to work, they raise their families. It's a tiny percentage, but it's a percentage that somehow takes control and creates a fear that goes across a neighborhood or across the city, and it's a multifaceted part of it's law enforcement, but look, we lock up more people in this country than any country in the world, so it can't be all about locking them up in prisons. We certainly have to be tough, but we also have to give people hope. Part of it is education, part of it is employment opportunities, part of it is an economy that we've seen in this country that's two-tiered. We have a lot of people doing very, very well in certain neighborhoods, and it doesn't touch them. But in some places, it kind of at the lower economic end of things, hope isn't so well. So when desperation occurs, hey, I can make money selling these powders or whatever,
sure.
Drugs, robbing, whatever it might be. Life isn't, all of a sudden isn't so worth so many things, and that's the kind of, we need to bring that value back, that everybody's life is valuable and everybody has an opportunity, and the hope that we need to, give in all neighborhoods in this city and in this county.
And you talked about the powders, alluding to the fact of drugs,
sure.
drug use,
right.
drug dealing, and a lot of it seems to be swirling around that. People becoming intoxicated with alcohol or drugs, hard drugs, and then committing just senseless crimes. And I picked on you talking about the county. What about the state? What kind of relief is the state working on?
Well, I can tell you that in September we have slated a special session on gun violence, and Pittsburgh does have a problem, but I think in Philadelphia, Philadelphia is always kind of 2 steps ahead of us when it comes to dealing with issues, and I think Philadelphia has been inundated with a number of really serious violent incidences. So I think we're going to have a lot of opportunity to debate some real key pieces of legislation that would help address some of the issues. I've introduced legislation. I've been working with the schools on a safe school advocate that Philadelphia already has, amending that. We've also talked about putting a higher penalty for guns involved in school violence, and
what's
expanding.
the safe school advocate? What's that about?
In Philadelphia, they have a safe school advocate that actually works with the victims to make in the administration of the building to make sure that right now, if a kid assaults another kid, aggravated assault, the kid that does the assault has rights, and until they go through the judicial process, they have to remain in school. So oftentimes the kid might be sitting right next to the person that they assaulted, and it's terrifying, and it's terrifying for the teacher to have to deal with that. In Philadelphia, they've actually created an office that's an advocate that works with the victims to make sure in those cases those kids are put into schools that are for more violent offenders, and they help prepare the assistant district attorneys so that they don't fall through the cracks when they go in front of the judicial system, and they also make recommendations to the staffs on how to increase security and how to deal with crisis situations. And I think that's something that we need to look at in Pittsburgh, as well as tightening the legislation as to if you bring a gun on school property or within 100 yards of school properties, you need to be charged with a serious crime because it's a serious action.
And I know one school district is expelling immediate. You got to go if you do anything.
But I think deeper than that, obviously this is an issue where we have to look at getting investment in the community and getting people the opportunity to play a role in improving their neighborhoods. I actually have a bill that passed out of the House. It's waiting for action in the Senate that I worked extensively with the city of Pittsburgh on.
I want to hold that thought because I want to talk some more about that.
Yeah.
We got to pay a few little bills here, so we're going to talk more about this legislation that he's proposing. The representative is proposing that might help solve the problem. Stay with us. Night Talk will return in just a moment. We're back with Night Talk. Duquesne University's Audrey Gusky is here. County Councilman Rich Fitzgerald, along with Representative Michael Diven. And I know the one thing you were saying, Representative Diven, is that there's legislation that you're proposing that might help. That's going to, we're going to try to help.
One of the things that I always go back to is the best human service program is a job. If somebody can go out and have pride in their work and have an opportunity to make a living for their family, it's the biggest deterrent that we have for crime. And one of the things that we look at, especially in some of the neighborhoods where we see the higher incidence of violence, is the lack of investment and the lack of opportunity. And one of the things that I've worked on actually helps solve a problem that the city has been wrestling with. The city of Pittsburgh has been in financial distress. They're in Act 47, and they haven't had the revenue to run the kind of city that they used to be able to run. Mm-hmm. Well, when you look at what's happened, we've had a mass exodus of people from the city, and our population has shrunk. And at the same time, we've seen an increase in the tax-exempt status of a lot of the properties. I think 37% of the city's property is now tax-exempt. Well, one of the things that I focused on from when I was on council, I was aware of this, is we have upwards to 20,000 properties in the city of Pittsburgh that are tax delinquent, blighted, and abandoned. They're off the tax rolls. They may have a real value of maybe $2,000 or $3,000, but they've got $60,000 worth of liens. So it's had a real chilling effect on people being able to come in and invest in the properties that are the worst properties in our communities. Mm-hmm. And it's not Pittsburgh, just Pittsburgh. Philadelphia obviously has, I think, 70,000, but along a lot of the Mon Valley communities. What I've done is I've created a vehicle that allows us to invest money from the state. It's a $200 million program that would allow us to go in and clear those liens and then give people, average people, and small businesses and even bigger businesses the opportunity to come in and present a proposal, and whoever has the highest and best use would get that property for $1. They would have to come in and invest, clean that property out, put it back on the tax rolls, and then from the future revenue that's created in the property tax, the state gets its money back into a continuing fund that allows us to continue to go after those blight that affects our neighborhoods and provides real opportunity for people to earn a living and help improve their communities. And I think that that's one real way where we can start to see significant investment, because right now a lot of these houses, the crack houses or the blighted houses, it's not that people can't invest in them, it's just somebody's not going to come in and spend $60,000 for a property that's worth $2,000 or $3,000 in a neighborhood that has significant blight in it. So I think it really gives us an opportunity to reinvest in our communities and rebuild our communities, and at the same time provide economic opportunities for those people that live there, and the opportunity for them to own their own home. I think home ownership is one of the most important things, and it's really the key that unlocks the American dream. I know that that's oftentimes the difference between middle class and poor is having that equity in the home to start your own business or to borrow against your house to put your kids through school, and it gives us the opportunity, and having 10 to 20,000 properties in the city of Pittsburgh that could potentially be somebody's nest egg and somebody's home equity.
That's a good thing.
It gives us an opportunity to provide them the resources to really make a life for themselves and their family.
Speaking of making a life for themselves, it was 10 years ago, it's hard to believe this month, that former President Bill Clinton had sweeping welfare reform. Has it worked? Has it been a good thing? Has it done anything to get, as you said, about the people getting hope, being able to have something and not just be a welfare person?
I think there's been some success, and I think that was one of the things that President Clinton ran on, and he delivered that promise, and I think it was kind of a good thing for hope in this country. But over the last 6 years, we've seen an administration that has not paid a lot of attention to the people at the bottom end of the economic scale. We're talking about problems, and we believe in home ownership. But when you now have the largest employer in the state of Pennsylvania being Walmart, as opposed to U.S. Steel years ago, it tells volumes about where this country is going.
And you're speaking to the fact of the incomes.
I'm talking about
Walmart.
exactly the income. People don't have health care. We haven't raised minimum wage in this country in many, many years. You have people that working poor that go out and work 40, 50 hours a week. They can't afford health care. They can't afford a mortgage. They can't afford all the things that we call the American dream. Until there's a change in priorities in this country, starting in Washington, continuing through Harrisburg and Allegheny County and Pittsburgh, we're going to continue down the wrong road. And I think, boy, I wish Bill Clinton was still the president, because he'd be doing a lot of other things too. Unfortunately, we're spending $200 billion, a year in a war in Iraq, in which nothing's ever going to change whenever we get out, and that's where our money's going.
I want to talk some more about this and what we can do, but we got to go to a break right now. But when we come back, we're going to talk some more about welfare reform, about job creation, about minimum wage. Stay with us. Night Talk will be right back after this. We're back with Night Talk on PCNC Get to the Point. And one of the points we're getting to is in August of 1996, then President Bill Clinton got sweeping welfare reform approved. And now it's 2006. What has happened? A lot of people still on welfare rolls, a lot of people still in poverty. What is the story about getting jobs created? How best can we, and particularly in Allegheny County, in the Pittsburgh area, which is seeing, my goodness, such a slide in jobs. People, and we talked earlier about drugs, and that's one of the reasons why I think a lot of people get into drugs, because they're in despair.
Right, and I think one of the things that the welfare reform did is helped a lot of women, particularly single women, get better educated and get there into the workforce. But my understanding is that African American young men, it didn't really help necessarily. And jobs is a huge thing. And one of the things we've been throwing around is the minimum wage, and the notion, have we raised it in the past 10 years? We haven't. And so a lot of the people who are working tremendous hours trying to improve their status in life, and it's not making an impact because it's still such a low wage for them.
And it's just like, I guess, the wheel. You're like the little rat on the wheel trying to spin, and you're just going round and round. You work, as you said before the break, Rich, you work 40, 60, 70 hours a week, and you have all these bills. You have 8 children. There are a lot of people that may have a lot of children, and they can't make ends meet because it's a constant struggle.
Yeah, well, I can tell you that in Harrisburg, we actually did pass legislation. I was a co-sponsor on it and voted for it, increasing the minimum wage in Pennsylvania. So I think that's a good step forward. We also have other pieces of legislation, like I'm a co-sponsor on legislation that's specifically kind of geared towards the Walmart set. Anything over, I think, 10,000 employees, you have to offer health care benefits to your employees, which I think is a good step. But I do think that a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with locally is the fact that our economy has really shifted in the past 40 years. We've gone from an industrial base to now a global market economy, and we see all these jobs being shipped overseas. We see kind of a breakdown in the resources that used to provide us with an ability for prominence in the world. I mean, we produced more steel in the Three Rivers here than the rest of the world combined did in World War II. Today, we've shifted a great deal towards high tech and biotech development, and I think we've done an excellent job. The Ben Franklin Partnership, those kind of the Pennsylvania Greenhouse, Digital Greenhouse. We've got a lot of these programs that.
Sure, we just got a minute left, guys, and I want to give you a chance for just a couple of seconds to talk real quick about some of the things you may be doing at Duquesne, etc.
Well, I'm hoping all the viewers take a peek at my Pittsburgh Business Times regular column, Service Rules, giving consumers tips, and also keep an eye out for FYI on Comcast. They are having a little series that I've put together called Consumer Sense. Once again, advice to consumers on how to get better customer service.
Rich?
Well, I think, I'm very proud of what the government in Allegheny County has been able to do with our base year plan, bringing down the cost of property tax for people under the leadership of Dan Honorado, and a really bipartisan council that works together. We've done some good things.
All right, Michael.
I'll keep it short. My wife needs me to convert a room into a nursery, so that's what I've been working on.
I've really enjoyed it. Thanks, everybody. A big applause, Republican Pennsylvania State Representative. Be sure to join Ann Devlin for Night Talk Monday night at 8. Enjoy. See you next time.